The city of Lagos shimmered under the afternoon sun. Cars hummed along the streets. Laughter echoed from cafes. And from the balcony of a grand two-story house in the heart of the city, Daniel Okoro looked out with quiet pride. He had built this life: the cars, the house, the respect. At 35, he was everything people admired. A self-made businessman, tall, confident, and polished in every way. His handshake was firm, his smile calculated, and his words carried weight in every room he entered. To outsiders, Daniel's life was perfect, and at the center of it all stood Amara, his beautiful wife, soft-spoken, graceful, and kind-hearted. She had a warmth that made everyone feel seen, even when they were strangers. Her laughter was gentle, her presence calm, her love unwavering. Together, they were the picture of success. A modern African couple adored by friends and envied by neighbors. But behind the golden curtains of their home, the story was different. Daniel loved the idea of marriage, but not the work it required. He saw love as something that should orbit him, always shining, always ready to please. Amara knew this, yet she tried to keep peace. She prayed every morning before he woke, asking God to keep their home filled with light. Their home was beautiful. Polished floors, marble counters, a chandelier that sparkled like morning dew. Yet there was a coldness in the air, a silence that no music could fill. Amara often sat by the window, her hand pressed against her chest as she caught her breath. The fainting spells had started weeks ago. At first, she thought it was fatigue. Long hours managing the home, helping her mother, volunteering at the women's center. But lately, it had grown worse. Her reflection in the mirror looked paler, her eyes dimmer. When she told Daniel she felt weak, he didn't look up from his phone. "You just need rest, Amara," he said, his voice flat. "You worry too much." He didn't notice the tremble in her hands. Each day, Amara pushed through the exhaustion. She smiled when guests visited, cooked Daniel's favorite meals, and hosted his friends with grace. To everyone, she seemed perfectly fine. The strong, devoted wife of a successful man. But at night, when the house grew still, Amara sat awake, whispering prayers into the darkness. She didn't want pity, only understanding. Daniel, meanwhile, was chasing recognition. Business meetings, social events, parties. He was always out, always performing. He liked being admired. He liked when people said, "You're a lucky man, Daniel. Your wife is a blessing." And he would smile proudly, as if she were another one of his achievements. But deep inside, Amara longed for something simple. A moment where Daniel would sit beside her, hold her hand and ask, "Are you really okay?" That moment never came. One afternoon, as she prepared lunch, her vision blurred. The plate slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. She tried to steady herself, gripping the counter, her heart racing. When Daniel walked in moments later, he sighed. "Amara, you have to be more careful," he muttered, stepping over the broken pieces. "You're too emotional these days." He didn't notice the tears that gathered in her eyes. Amara knelt quietly to clean the shards, whispering an apology that wasn't hers to give. To the world. Daniel and Amara were still perfect, attending church hand in hand, posing for photos, smiling through every event. But the truth was beginning to surface like cracks in polished glass. In the quiet moments, when no one was watching, Amara's strength was fading, and Daniel, too focused on his image, couldn't see that the love that once filled their home was slipping away. One silent moment at a time. The perfect life was still standing, but only on the outside. Weeks passed, and Amara's body grew weaker. Her steps became slower. Her hands shook when she poured water, and her once bright eyes now carried shadows of pain. Still, she tried to smile through it. Because in Daniel's world, weakness was not allowed. Daniel had a big dinner planned that evening, an important night for his company. His business partners were coming over to discuss a new deal. He wanted everything to be flawless: the food, the music, the presentation. And of course, he wanted his wife to look perfect beside him. That morning, Amara could barely stand. The dizziness had become constant. She begged Daniel to let her rest, but he only frowned. "Amara, don't embarrass me today," he said sharply. "Just smile and be yourself. You'll be fine." And so, despite the pain twisting inside her, Amara got dressed. She wore a long golden gown, simple but elegant, and tied her hair into a soft bun. She looked beautiful, even though her body trembled with every breath. When the guests arrived, the house came alive with laughter and chatter. Daniel was in his element, charming, confident, pouring drinks, cracking jokes. Everyone admired him. But as the evening went on, Amara felt her strength slipping. She tried to stay steady, her hand gripping the table. The room spun slowly, the lights blurring. She excused herself quietly to get some air. Then it happened. As she reached the doorway, her knees buckled. The sound of a glass crashing to the floor cut through the laughter. Guests gasped as Amara collapsed. Her body hit the marble floor with a soft thud. For a moment, there was silence. Then Daniel laughed. He forced a chuckle, waving his hand as if it were nothing. "Ah, my wife," he said loudly, trying to sound amused. "She always finds a way to steal the spotlight." A few awkward laughs followed, though everyone could see the fear in Amara's still body. Two guests rushed forward to help her, but Daniel stayed back, adjusting his suit with a stiff smile. His pride wouldn't let him show concern. When Amara finally stirred, embarrassed and weak, she apologized in a whisper. Daniel leaned down and muttered through clenched teeth, "You're ruining everything. Get up." Later, when the guests had left and the house was quiet, Daniel paced the living room. His tone was cold. "You made me look like a fool tonight. You could have waited. You just had to collapse in front of everyone." Amara stared at him, her eyes filled with disbelief. "I didn't mean to," she began softly. But he cut her off with a dismissive laugh. "You always find ways to make things about you." That night, she lay awake in bed, her body aching, tears slipping down her cheeks. Daniel snored beside her, unbothered, the echo of his laughter still ringing in her ears. But it didn't end there. A few days later, Amara woke in the middle of the night. The light from Daniel's study spilled faintly under the door. She walked closer, hearing his voice on the phone. "Yes, my friend," Daniel said, laughing quietly. "She's too weak these days. Always tired, always sick. I married a queen and ended up with a patient." There was laughter on the other end. Daniel joined in. Amara froze in the hallway, her heart breaking one silent beat at a time. That laughter, the same one that once made her fall in love, now cut through her like a blade. It wasn't warm anymore. It was cruel. She leaned against the wall, clutching her chest, feeling small and unseen. Yet, even in that moment of humiliation, she didn't lash out. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer. "God, give me strength to endure. Help me not to hate him." From that night, Amara changed. Her smiles became fewer, her words softer, her silences longer. She stopped expecting kindness from Daniel and began turning inward, finding comfort in faith. And Daniel? He noticed her silence but mistook it for obedience. He didn't realize that what was dying in his home wasn't just Amara's health. It was love itself. The laughter that once filled their house had turned into an echo of mockery, and it was slowly destroying them both. The days after the dinner felt heavier. Amara moved slowly around the house, her energy slipping away like sand between her fingers. The once bright woman who filled every corner with laughter now walked like a shadow, pale, quiet, and fading. Daniel noticed her weakness, But instead of compassion, irritation grew in his voice. "You can't keep acting like this, Amara," he said one morning as she tried to sit up in bed. "You're making this house feel gloomy." She wanted to speak, to tell him she couldn't even feel her legs sometimes, but she stayed silent. Every word seemed to make things worse. When she finally went to the hospital, the doctor's face grew serious. He spoke gently but firmly, explaining that Amara had developed a rare infection attacking her immune system. It wasn't deadly, not yet, but she needed rest, nutrition, and peace. Peace. That was the one thing missing in her home. The doctor gave her medication and advised Daniel to ensure she didn't stress. But Daniel only nodded half-heartedly. To him, the doctor's words were just another inconvenience in his busy schedule. Back home, he dropped her off and left for a meeting. "I'll check on you later," he said. But he never did. That evening, Amara sat alone in the living room, watching the rain slide down the window. Every drop seemed to whisper something she didn't want to hear. You are alone. The house, once full of life, now echoed with silence. Even the air felt different. Colder, heavier. Daniel continued with his life as if nothing had changed. He attended parties, laughed with friends, and posted smiling photos online. To the world, he was still the charming husband, devoted and successful. But inside those walls, his wife was fading. Unseen, Amara tried to hold on to hope. She prayed every night, her weak hands clasped together, whispering, "God, don't let my heart turn bitter." Her sister Ngozi visited often. She saw the truth that others ignored. The neglect, the emptiness, the loneliness. "Amara," she said one afternoon, "you need to tell someone. You can't live like this." But Amara shook her head. "He's my husband. I made vows before God." Ngozi's eyes filled with tears. "Vows don't mean suffering, sister." One evening, as Ngozi was leaving, Daniel came home, his tone sharp. "Why do you always run to her?" he asked Amara. "You make me look weak when people see her coming here all the time." "She's just helping me," Amara whispered. Daniel scoffed. "Helping you? You should be helping me. I'm the one working to keep this family alive." Those words sank deep into her heart. As the weeks passed, her body grew frailer. She barely had the strength to cook or stand. The house that once gleamed under her care became dull and lifeless. Even the flowers she used to tend to had wilted, their petals drooping like her spirit. One night, unable to sleep, Amara heard Daniel in the study again. His voice was low but clear through the door. "Yes, yes," he said on the phone, laughing softly. "She's still sick, if you can call it that. Barely alive, but still won't die. Maybe she just loves the attention." Amara froze. The air left her lungs. The man she had once trusted with her soul, the man she had prayed for, was laughing at her pain again. Tears rolled down her cheeks, soaking her pillow. She covered her mouth to silence her sobs. Every laugh from him felt like another knife twisting in her chest. She turned to look at their wedding photo on the wall. The smiles, the joy, the promise. How quickly those promises had turned to dust. The next morning, Daniel acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed her forehead lightly before heading out, pretending to care. But she knew the truth now. The distance between them was not just emotional. It was spiritual. Something in her broke quietly that day. She stopped trying to make him understand. She stopped hoping he would change. Her silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was survival. Amara began writing in a small notebook she kept hidden in her drawer. She wrote prayers, thoughts, and memories, small pieces of herself that Daniel could no longer touch. Her faith became her strength, her last line of defense against the cruelty of the man she once loved. Outside, life continued as if nothing was wrong. Daniel's world remained bright and busy, but in the quiet corners of his perfect home, something precious was slipping away. The love that once made him human. And when Amara looked at him now, she didn't see her husband anymore. She saw a stranger laughing in the face of Grace, a man blind to the very heart that once beat for him. Morning sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains, landing on Amara's frail body as she sat motionless on the edge of the bed. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to button her dress. The mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized. Tired eyes, thinning frame, yet something flickered behind those eyes, something small but alive. She whispered softly to herself, "Enough." It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it carried a quiet power that had been missing from her voice for months. That morning, she decided to live, not just survive. For so long she had prayed for Daniel's heart to change. But now, she realized maybe God wasn't asking her to wait for him. Maybe he was asking her to move. She packed a small bag, not with clothes, but with things that mattered. Her notebook, her mother's rosary, her late father's photograph, and the medical prescriptions she could barely afford to refill. Then she sat at the table and wrote a short letter. "Daniel, I have loved you beyond reason. I stayed when I should have walked away, believing love could heal what cruelty had broken. But I cannot let my soul die while my body fights to live. I'm leaving for a while, not in anger, but in hope that you will one day find the man you lost to pride." She folded the note and placed it on the table beside his favorite watch, the one she had given him on their 5th anniversary. Then she took a deep breath, stepped outside, and closed the door quietly behind her. The world outside felt different, wider, freer. The air hit her lungs with a sting, but it was the sting of life returning. She went to her sister Ngozi's home. When Ngozi opened the door and saw her, pale and trembling, she didn't ask questions. She simply pulled her into a long embrace. "Welcome home," Ngozi whispered. Those 2 words were enough to break the dam inside Amara. She cried, deeply, painfully, beautifully. Not tears of despair this time, but release. Every sob carried a piece of the old pain out of her. Days turned into weeks. Under Ngozi's care, Amara began to heal. Her appetite returned slowly. Her laughter, faint but real, began to fill the small house. She volunteered at the local women's center, helping others facing illness and domestic neglect. The women there admired her strength. "You speak like someone who's walked through fire," one said. Amara smiled softly. "I did, but the fire didn't destroy me. It refined me." For the first time in years, she felt useful, alive. Back at the house, Daniel returned that night to an empty home. He found the note, read it twice, and laughed bitterly. "She'll be back," he muttered. "She always comes back." But the days passed. Then weeks. No message, no call. Her absence began to echo in every corner. The silence that he once demanded now pressed on him like a weight. Without Amara's presence, the house felt haunted. Not by ghosts, but by memories. He noticed the little things she used to do. The folded napkins, the scent of lavender, the soft hums while cooking. And now they were gone. He started coming home earlier, but the emptiness stayed. His laughter at parties grew forced. People noticed he was quieter now, distracted. Something was missing. Something he couldn't name. Meanwhile, Amara's strength continued to grow. Her skin regained color, her smile returned. She started a small catering business with Ngozi, using her old recipes. The community supported her, drawn to her gentle spirit and resilience. One evening, during a local fundraiser, Amara shared her story, not mentioning Daniel by name, but speaking of the pain of being unseen, unloved, and unvalued. The hall was silent. Every word carried the weight of truth, and when she finished, people rose to their feet, applauding. She didn't cry that night. She simply smiled. not with pride, but with peace. Then, one Sunday morning, Daniel showed up at Ngozi's doorstep. He looked nothing like the man he once was. Eyes hollow, beard unkempt, pride broken. When Amara stepped out, her heart skipped, not from love, but from memory. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Daniel said softly, "You look better." Amara nodded. "I am." He swallowed hard. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." "I didn't think you'd notice if I did," she replied quietly. Her calmness disarmed him. He looked at her, searching for the woman he once controlled, the one who trembled at his words. But she was gone. In her place stood a woman who had found her voice. "I came to say I'm sorry," he murmured. "I was cruel. I didn't see what I had." Amara looked at him, her expression gentle but firm. "You didn't just not see it, Daniel. You laughed at it." The words hung between them like judgment and mercy intertwined. "I forgive you," she said after a long pause. But forgiveness isn't the same as returning. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes for the first time. He nodded slowly, understanding what words could not fix. That night, Amara sat by the window, looking at the stars. She whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for him, because forgiveness was not weakness anymore. It was freedom. She had fallen, but she had risen again, stronger, wiser, whole. And as the wind brushed against her face, Amara finally smiled. The smile of a woman who had survived the storm and found peace in her own dawn. Months passed. The world moved on, as it always does, but in two very different directions. For Amara, life was beginning again. For Daniel, life was slowly unraveling. Amara's light, the morning sun, poured through the windows of Ngozi's small bakery, where Amara now worked as a co-owner. Laughter echoed as customers filled the air with chatter and the scent of fresh bread. Amara's hands moved gracefully, dusted with flour, steady, confident, alive. She had gained weight again, her eyes sparkled, and her voice carried warmth. Her illness had not disappeared, but it no longer defined her. Every morning she whispered a small prayer. "Thank you for the strength I did not know I had." Her faith had shifted. It was no longer a plea for survival, but a song of gratitude. Children in the neighborhood loved her gentle smile. Women came to her for advice. She spoke often about self-worth, about the strength in leaving when love turns into pain. Amara had become a quiet symbol of hope, a woman reborn from sorrow. At night, she would sit outside on the porch, looking at the stars with a soft cup of tea in hand. She didn't think of Daniel with anger anymore, only a faint sadness, like the ache of an old scar. "I forgive you," she had said once, and she had meant it. Daniel's darkness, but for Daniel, forgiveness did not erase his guilt. It only made the silence louder. His home had become a shell, too clean, too quiet, too empty. He no longer laughed. The mirror in his bedroom showed a man aged far beyond his years. He tried to fill the void with work, but even his colleagues noticed the change. "You've been off lately," one said. Daniel shrugged. "Just tired." But tired was an understatement. At night, sleep refused to come. When he closed his eyes, he saw Amara's face. Not the weak, sickly one, but the calm strength she carried when she forgave him. That memory haunted him more than her tears ever had. He began visiting the places they once loved, the cafe, the park, the small church near their old home. Everywhere, her absence followed him like a shadow. One evening, he found himself parked outside Ngozi's bakery, watching from a distance. Through the glass window, he saw Amara laughing with customers, her face radiant. It hit him then. She was happy without him. He felt something tighten in his chest. Not jealousy, but regret, so deep it burned. The encounter? A week later, he gathered the courage to step inside. The bell above the door chimed softly. Amara looked up, surprised but not shaken. She smiled politely. "Daniel!" "Amara," he breathed, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Gozi watched quietly from behind the counter, ready to intervene if needed. But Amara raised a hand. Calm, composed, they sat at a corner table. The air between them was thick with unspoken things. "You look happy," he said finally. "I am," she replied gently. "And you?" Daniel gave a sad smile. "I thought success would fill the emptiness. But without you, everything feels meaningless." Amara nodded, her eyes kind but firm. "That's because what you called success was never love, Daniel. It was pride." He looked down, his voice trembling. "I laughed when you needed me most. I mocked your pain. I don't know how to forgive myself." "Then stop trying to," she said softly. "Forgiveness isn't earned. It's received. Just live better than you did before." Her words weren't sharp. They were merciful, like light breaking through a storm. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "You're stronger than I ever realized." "I had to be," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. Sometimes pain is the only teacher that listens. They talked a little longer, not as husband and wife, but as two souls who had finally found peace in truth. When he left, Daniel turned once more to look at her. This woman he had broken, who somehow became whole again without him, and for the first time in years, he felt something pure stir inside him. Remorse, yes, but also hope. A new dawn weeks passed again. Daniel began volunteering at a local health foundation, using his resources to help women in abusive or neglected relationships. It was his way of repenting, of rebuilding something meaningful from the wreckage he caused. He never told anyone why he did it. But Amara knew. Occasionally, she would see his name in the community bulletin listed as a donor. She smiled quietly whenever she did. Forgiveness had done its work. It had freed them both in different ways. One evening, as the sun sank low over the town, Amara walked through the garden behind the bakery. The air was soft, golden, full of the scent of lilies. She tilted her head back, eyes closed, and felt the warmth on her skin. The light felt different now, not harsh or fleeting, but steady. It no longer came from outside her life. It came from within. The woman who once sat in darkness had found her dawn, not because someone rescued her, but because she chose to rise. And somewhere across town, Daniel watched the same sunset, his hands clasped in silent prayer, whispering words he should have said long ago. "Thank you for her life. And thank you for this second chance, even if it's without her." Time passed, quiet but unrelenting, months folding into years. The city had changed, and so had Daniel. He was no longer the proud man who once measured worth by status and laughter. His once flawless suits were now replaced by simple shirts. His luxurious car traded for something modest. The empire he built through ego had long crumbled. Yet for the first time, he felt rich in spirit. He spent his days at the Grace Wellness Center, the same place where Amara had once healed. He swept the floors, fixed broken furniture, delivered meals to patients. Nobody there cared who he used to be. And for that, he was grateful. He never told them his story, but the staff could see it in his eyes. A man carrying both guilt and grace, a different kind of wealth. One morning, the center hosted a small seminar for recovering patients. Daniel helped arrange the chairs and place flowers by the window. When the speaker arrived, the entire hall went silent. It was Amara. She walked in, radiant in a white dress, her smile calm and luminous. Though Daniel had known she often visited, seeing her again still struck him with awe. She spoke gently, her voice steady as sunlight. "Pain can break us," she said, "but if we let it, It can also teach us compassion. Some wounds don't fade. They become part of our strength. Daniel stood at the back, listening. Her words cut through him, not as accusations, but as redemption. Every syllable reminded him of who he had been and how far he had come. When the event ended, Amara turned and noticed him. Their eyes met. Not as strangers, not as former lovers, but as two souls finally free from the storm. A conversation long overdue. Later that day, Amara found him outside, tending the garden behind the center. The flowers had bloomed beautifully. Bright yellows, soft purples, and deep reds swaying under the wind. She approached quietly. "You've made this place beautiful," she said. Daniel looked up, his face lined with humility. "I just water what others planted. That's all I can do now," she smiled softly. "That's more than most people ever learn to do." He hesitated, wiping his hands. "Amara, I've wanted to tell you something for a long time. I don't expect forgiveness. You already gave me that. But I want you to know, I've changed because of you." Amara's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed calm. "You changed because of what you learned, Daniel." "I was just the mirror." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Still, I wish I could go back." "Don't," she said gently. "Pride made you cruel, but guilt can make you just as blind. You can't live chained to what you lost. Live for what you can give now." Her words were simple, but they hit deep. Daniel exhaled slowly, his gaze lowering. "You're happy now?" "I am," she answered, smiling faintly. "Not because life is perfect, but because I finally found peace." There was silence. Not awkward, but full of understanding. The kind that exists between two people who have already said everything that needed to be said. Then Amara added, "I'm proud of the man you're becoming, Daniel." He blinked back tears. "You mean that?" "I do. What you're doing now, this is love. Real love. The kind that gives, without needing to be seen." She touched his shoulder lightly, a gesture of grace. Not affection, not nostalgia, but blessing. Then she walked away, her white dress fluttering in the soft wind, leaving Daniel standing in quiet reflection. A heart-renewed days turned into weeks. Daniel continued his volunteer work, not for redemption anymore, but for purpose. He began mentoring young men who struggled with anger, pride, and neglect in their relationships. He told them stories, not naming names, not confessing identities, but each story carried truth. He would say, "Never laugh at someone's pain. Life has a way of turning the laughter back at you." Not to punish, but to teach. People began to listen. One afternoon, he visited the children's ward of the nearby hospital. The walls were painted with colors and laughter. He donated supplies in Amara's name. Quietly, anonymously, as he watched the children smile, something inside him shifted. Not sorrow, not regret, but peace. He realized that forgiveness wasn't a moment. It was a journey, one that began with Amara's pain and ended with his humility. That evening, Daniel walked home beneath a golden sunset. The air smelled of rain and earth, fresh, alive. He paused, looking at the horizon, whispering softly, "Thank you, God, for the woman who taught me to see light, even when I was blind." A small smile crossed his face, not one of arrogance, but of quiet gratitude. The man who once laughed at suffering had learned to find meaning in compassion, and though their paths had parted, their spirits remained forever bound by a lesson too sacred to forget. Pride destroys, love restores, forgiveness redeems. The city slept under a golden dusk, and the world had fallen quiet, as if holding its breath at the end of a long story. Amara stood on a hill overlooking the countryside, where the Grace Wellness Center shimmered faintly in the distance. The wind brushed through her hair as she closed her eyes, listening to the gentle sounds of evening, children laughing, women singing, and life breathing all around her. That laughter. It was no longer the sound that once hurt her. It had changed. It was pure, healing, and alive. Amara's reflection. Narration. People say laughter is medicine, but they forget it can also be a wound. I learned that not all laughter comes from joy. Some comes from pride, from blindness, from fear. Once, a man laughed at my pain, and for a long time, I thought that sound would haunt me forever. But the truth is, I found peace, not by silencing the echo, but by changing its meaning. She opened her eyes and smiled faintly. The horizon burned softly with hues of gold and rose. The same sky that once watched her cry now seemed to whisper, "You survived." Daniel's peace. Across town, in a small children's hospital, Daniel sat beside a young boy who had lost his mother. He told him stories, not about wealth or success, but about kindness, patience, and courage. When the boy laughed, Daniel smiled too. It was gentle, humble, the kind of laughter that came from understanding pain. After leaving the hospital, he walked alone down the quiet street, his hands in his pockets, his head bowed in thought. The moon rose above the city skyline, calm and forgiving. He stopped for a moment and whispered, "Amara, I hope you know, you saved me, even when I didn't deserve saving." He didn't cry. He didn't need to. His heart was finally still. The final parallel Amara, at the same time, stood at the edge of a small lake near the healing center. She looked down at her reflection, steady, peaceful, glowing beneath the moonlight. Forgiveness, her voice echoed softly, isn't about forgetting what was done to you. It's about remembering it without pain. It's about choosing peace over bitterness and love over revenge. The water rippled gently, scattering her reflection into fragments of light. But in every piece, there was a smile. Closing scene. A year later, a new wing was opened at the Wellness Center, the Amara Foundation for Women's Healing. On the dedication plaque, beneath her name, were the words she had once written in her letter to Daniel. Even broken things can shine again if they are touched by grace. The camera pans upward, toward the sunrise. Amara walks through the garden, her hands brushing the flowers Daniel once planted. The light spills over her face, warm and golden. A faint sound of laughter rises, soft, pure, untainted by pride.